In Washington Heights.
Congratulations on In the Heights. It was a lovely musical. But as a Black woman of Cuban descent, specifically from New York City, what are your thoughts on the lack of Black Latinx people represented in your film?
Awkward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something we talked about, and I needed to be educated about, of course. I hear you on, trying to fill those cast members with darker skin. I think that's a really good conversation to have.
Okay.
To number one, Jeremy here from The Quartering, and we have our first Hollywood disaster at the box office in the post-lockdown era. Now, we've seen normie films get people out to the theaters in modest numbers. I think that, ultimately, the fact that A Quiet Place Part 2, which was a theater-only release, took a long time to pass $100 million, but it did pass $100 million. It was a big threshold, is something to be celebrated. People are going back, living their lives, and I do think that rewarding original scripts or movies is worth it. I did enjoy A Quiet Place Part 2. I actually really did. And I'm looking forward to the third and final piece of the puzzle. But Hollywood then put out what was absolutely beloved by critics, a musical about Washington Heights. It's a joyous celebration of heritage and community fueled by direction and sing-along songs, okay? So obviously this I am not the target demographic for this film. You couldn't pay me to see a musical. Well, I suppose maybe you could, but I'm not going to the theater to see one. But critics absolutely loved it, giving it a 96%, and critics and audience giving it a 95%. Absolutely demolishing the critic reviews, and with 1,000 verified ratings. Remember, they moved to this verified ratings thing where you have to have proof that you paid to see the movie. I don't know how they do verified ratings when it comes to like Warner Brothers releases. Like, how are you verified if you watch it on HBO Max? But, they don't make them like this anymore. Every critic absolutely love it. Except two people saying, why are the visuals so relentlessly static and boring? Why doesn't the movie soar away from the stage, doing what film versions on the stage are supposed to do, broaden rather than strangle the virtues of the material? In the Heights is everything a movie musical should be. A gorgeous spectacle with likable leads and memorable characters. Everybody talking about how stunning and brave. And hey, look, I'm cool having movies that exist that, of course, Armand White gave it a negative review. That's what he's famous for. So for the most part, almost everybody agrees that this movie is amazing, except for, actual people that, might want to pay to see a movie in the post-lockdown era. You can see here, woke Hollywood surprised, shocked. In the Heights was a failure. Now, from what I can tell, the budget for this movie was $51 million. And if we use the Hollywood, the generally accepted budget, that means we double that. So they spend another $50 million on advertising and marketing. So we have let's call it $100 million to be fair in production costs. The movie made $11 million, less than half of its estimates. Woke Hollywood is surprised that its diversity-filled musical In the Heights absolutely tanked at the box office. The flick made its debut the past weekend, but only beat out by a third week. But it was beat out by the third week run of A Quiet Place Part 2. Go see that movie. I like it. If you haven't seen the first one, obviously see that. As John Krasinski's sequel brought in more than $12 million, while The Heights brought in $11.5, which is almost half of the opposites. In other words, a complete disaster. While the movie had a same-day launch on HBO Max, guess what? In the Heights also tanked on HBO Max, as Deadline reports in the musical had low viewership on the streaming service. Deadline also attempts to spin things why In the Heights failed. And while I haven't seen it, there are some stating it wasn't a woke musical. Apparently it was marketed as woke, so no surprise, moviegoers skipped it, and as did people at home. In the report, Deadline in part offers. You can see Paramount's A Quiet Place Part 2 in its third week has beaten Warner Brothers' highly publicized John M. Chu directed Lin-Manuel Miranda musical In the Heights for the top spot at the weekend box office, 11.7 to 11.4 million. It is a defeat no one saw coming. A Quiet Place Part 2's domestic running box office stands at 109 million. You know why this is? It's because people want to be entertained. And even if the movie wasn't woke, the marketing of such led to the perception that it would be. I mean, heck, Cats still made money. So In the Heights is just another woke failure in a long line of woke failures from Hollywood, which includes Ghostbusters 2016. Disney Star Wars, I wouldn't call that a failure. I mean, they had, obviously Solo didn't make money, but let's not pretend that they're not making hundreds of millions of dollars. Marvel's Captain Marvel, again, that made $1 billion. I don't think it's fair. Look, I'm not going to be disingenuous and call Captain Marvel a failure. Even if everyone hated the movie, it's still box office $1 billion, and I don't think that it's reasonable to do that. And in fact, in all my coverage of that film leading up to it, I always said it would do well because Marvel made it require reading for Endgame. And that's just what it was. So, one does wonder, why exactly they continue to push back the release of the Marvels. Miss Marvel with a relatively unknown director and a wide variety of other things. But I digress. You have obviously Terminator, Dark Fate, you could call that. That was kind of this woke woman up front, or the new Terminator movie. That failed. Birds of Prey failed. Doctor Who failed. Supergirl, Batwoman, they failed. I don't think you can call Captain Marvel and Disney Stars. Look, I've got to be, I've got to have integrity here. We also get some insights into woke Hollywood from filmmaker and novelist Cameron Pasha, who worked on the Roswell's New Mexico, Nikita, King, Rain, Tron, Sleeper Cell, Twilight Zone, and more. Great guy to follow on Twitter. He writes, Hollywood is currently shocked, in all caps, that In the Heights, a woke musical focusing on inner city minorities, bombed. A Quiet Place Part 2, a film about a white family surviving the apocalypse, remains #1 at the box office. You know who's not shocked? Everyone else. The tragedy of In the Heights is that it's based on a successful musical, is well cast, and would appeal to all, but Hollywood is so interested in creating identity boxes that they've marketed it as only for minorities. And now the woke and condemning the woke are condemning the casting as not dark enough. That's the best spin of this. This actually is a spectacular backfire. We're going to get to that in a second. None of the woke people he is scraping and bowing to went to see In the Heights, and now they're calling this poor guy a racist for casting, quote, white passing Latinos, who look pretty effing Latino to me. I have heard that it was a great movie. The marketing has been disastrously woke, which was a mistake. Hollywood still isn't learning that pandering to a tiny fringe of society and alienating the broad populace is stupid, especially when the movie would appeal to everyone like this. Someone replies, it's not just the woke, the Latinx woke us taking down yet another one of their Manuel Miranda. He's an incredible talent, doesn't deserve this misguided criticism. He writes, fully agree. I was on a live stream with Master of the TDS and Writing Raven and said that Lin-Manuel Miranda is a very talented guy and I'm a big fan of his work. The woke are the racists at heart. They seek to sabotage minorities who are beginning to rise in the industry. In the writer's room on a TV show, I once said, white people are still the majority of the population. Maybe we should appeal to them too, not just minorities, if we want the show to succeed. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy. By the way, this guy does not appear to be white either. Oh, he follows me. I'll follow you. There you go, bud. Good take. And so the movie flops, right? Now there's backlash. So this is what happens. You appeal desperately to a particular group of weirdos, and then they eat you alive. That's essentially what's happening here. Despite an early onslaught of critical praise, the highly anticipated by no one film adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's first Broadway musical, In the Heights, failed to draw crowds to the movie theaters over its premiere weekend. Instead, a wave of backlash surfaced over the film's lack of visibly dark-skinned Afro-Latinx characters, the very community the film purports to represent. Okay. The Tony-winning hit musical that made Lin-Manuel Miranda a Broadway name himself a decade before Hamilton debuted depicts a struggling but vibrant neighborhood on Manhattan's Upper West Side. But while the new film is a celebration of Washington Heights, it's very easy to come away from it thinking the community is entirely made up of mostly light-skinned Latinx migrants and immigrants. By the way, no self-respecting Latino individual calls themselves Latinx. This is backed up not only by me knowing Latino people, by actual science and data. Most Latino people have no idea what that term even means and would think it's probably an insult. Though a large portion of the neighborhood's real-life population is Black Latinx, in the movie, all but one of the main characters are light-skinned, and many viewers immediately notice what seemed to be the erasure of the Black Latinx community. I mean, this whole art, like this, I mean, why go back to action, bring back like 80s action films. You know, they never had to deal with this garbage. And you have here, from The Root, talking about the article, the very first thing this woman says.
Congratulations on In the Heights. It was a lovely musical. But as a Black woman of Cuban descent, specifically from New York City, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge the fact that most of your principal actors were light-skinned or white-passing Latinx people.
They look Latino to me.
So with that, what are your thoughts on the lack of Black Latinx people represented in the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something we talked about and I needed to be educated about.
So essentially, this guy then has to come out and apologize. So not only did your movie completely bomb, okay, now you've had to come out as what is clearly a non-white person and apologize for not having dark enough people in your film. Stop pandering to these weirdos. Here's a perfect picture. Here's Pasha saying exactly what, not Latino, Latino. I mean, that's exactly what this is. It's so ridiculous. Good Lord, Gina. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Get woke, go broke. We'll talk to you again real soon.